Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our special guest here, Aaliyah Gaskins, as well. Thank you so much for tuning into Emerge's interview series with women elected officials. We're so excited, joined by Emerge Virginia alum Aaliyah Gaskins, who's running for Alexandria City Council in Alexandria, Virginia.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Diane. I'm really excited to be here. And I also just love the intro music. I was not expecting that. So
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. Glad you caught that. So I'm just going to dive right into it. First and foremost, how are you doing, and how are the families in Alexandria doing?
yeah, great question. And I have to just say, I appreciate you taking time to stop and ask that question. I think sometimes we're all so busy and moving so quickly that we never just pause to see how are you and how are you really. I will say for me right now, I'm well. This is my last thing before I get to go play with my son. So I'm kind of just excited and ready to get outside with him. I'd say to the second part of your question around how are Alexandria families doing, I think like all of us during this pandemic, we've all had highs and lows. We are navigating this world of uncertainty right now. There are families in our community that I think are, on the brink of eviction, are trying to figure out where their next meals will come from. And then there are others who have a completely different reality. So I think part of being in this city is understanding that we are all navigating just day by day and facing different challenges and opportunities, and trying to make a city that works for all is possible, but it's hard.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that you are personally doing well. And just to echo some of the things that you've already touched on, what are some of the biggest problems facing your community, and what has been your approach in addressing these issues?
Yeah. So I would say we've got some big challenges. Anyone who's following Alexandria in the news recognize some conversations around our flooding, school safety, affordable housing. I'd say for me, the biggest challenge that I've tried to dive into in my campaign has been just the lack of opportunities that I feel we have for meaningful community engagement. I think no matter what the challenge is, if we're not reaching the voices of those people most impacted by these issues, then we're going to pass policies that either leave people out or push them out completely. And so for me, I've really been trying to think about, it's not enough to just think, okay, we want affordable housing or we want transit-oriented development. But I think we should be thinking about what's the democratic infrastructure and the spaces that people need to be able to be a part of that conversation and owning what that looks like. So my campaign has really focused on leading by listening. I'm trying to go to the places where people are, whether that's sitting at bus stops or just going to restaurants and coffee shops and farmers markets and just walking down the street, trying to get to know people and asking them what are their concerns, but also what are their hopes and desires for this city.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And keep up the good work. I know that you have an impressive background in public health. If elected to the Alexandria City Council, how will you continue to work to ensure that your community overcomes the effects of COVID-19?
Yeah. I think it's really going to take a comprehensive solution. I think first and foremost is continuing to invest in our public health infrastructure. I remember when I started my campaign, I spoke with one of our great public health workers, and she said, before the pandemic, we're getting like 15, 20 calls a day. And then when the pandemic started at its height, they were getting upwards of 300, 400 calls a day. And there just wasn't the staff capacity or the infrastructure to even be able to respond. And so I think we have to recognize that public health matters, not just during a pandemic, and we need to continuously invest in our staffing, their infrastructure, and their ability to be out in community, connecting with people and meeting them where they are. I think a full COVID recovery, though, requires us to be thinking about this across many sectors. So if we take housing, the best advice we had during this pandemic was at one point shelter in place. But if you don't have a home, or you're in a home that has mold, rodents, or other challenges, what are we doing to ensure that all people have safe, decent housing? As a new mom, childcare is a big priority for me. So I think part of the COVID recovery has to ensure making making sure that we are expanding opportunities for high quality childcare for our 0 to 3-year-olds. I also think there's a lot of work we need to be doing around our small businesses, especially businesses owned by women and people of color. So I think really thinking about this is our moment, not just to go back to the way it was, but to leverage what has been a horrible and devastating crisis to help us come out with a more equitable, healthier, and just community.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to meet people where they are. So thank you for that. And now here's a question that's sort of near and dear to my heart. By 2035, we will see America's new demographic majority arrive. And that includes women of the new American majority, Black, Brown, Indigenous women, women of color, as well as unmarried young LGBTQ plus women. And it's amazing to see these women step up from the new American majority in unprecedented numbers. But we still have a long way to go. So why is it critical that we train more of these women and bring them to the table?
Yeah. I am so excited about this moment that we are in and to be a part of the new American majority. What I would say is it's critical, and it goes back to something I said earlier. If we do not have the voices and the experiences of people who are closest to the issues that our community are facing, then we are never going to create, I think, the communities, the nation, the just places that we can be that truly value and celebrate the diversity in this country. And so I think it's important because we need those voices, we need those experiences shaping the policies, shaping the conversation, and really bringing different perspectives to the table.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And thank you for stepping up to run yourself. And as you know, more than anyone, really, running for office requires a lot of support. And here at Emerge, we're accelerating our work so that more Democratic women of the new American majority run for office and hold elected and appointed offices as well. In your opinion, what does that support look like running for office?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I would say the types of support I needed most during this campaign first would be really kind of just like that, for lack of a better word, like that mental support, like having friends, family, and people around me who it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot to step in and throw your name in the race. And having people around me when I'm exhausted or when I just need an extra push who could be like, Aaliyah, you've got this. And like, we support you. I think that is invaluable when you need that push to keep going. And a lot of my Emerge sisters have played that role for me. I'd say the other huge, huge support is financial. It costs a lot of money to run for office. And I think sometimes people think, oh, well, you're just running for local office. It can't be that expensive. Mail is expensive. Reaching people during a pandemic is expensive. And I don't come from a family that has lots of money or friends that, networks that have tons either. And so I think getting the support to be able to connect people, especially women of color, to resources, being able to help with making that ask is critical in raising the funds that you need to run an effective campaign.
Absolutely. I love when people don't think that local campaigns cost money. Very funny to me. And I love that you talked about the Emerge sisterhood as well. And that's something that we've seen sort of organically grow in our network. And what encouraged you to join the Emerge network and the Emerge sisterhood? What has your experience been like working with your other Emerge sisters and meeting them for the first time?
So I joined Emerge because two of my friends had went through the program. So it goes back to that sisterhood. I think talking to them, understanding more about their experience and what they took away and just how beneficial they found the program, I kept thinking to myself, well, maybe this is something I want to do too. And then honestly, when it came time for applications, both of them were like, you're applying to this. Like, we know you will love this. You need to do this. And so also having their encouragement to take that step was important. I'd say in terms of like how this sisterhood has just benefited me, that those friendships have deepened, but also I've gotten to know so many new friends as well. And when I look at my campaign team, the first people I called and asked to volunteer on my team are some of my Emerge sisters. They're the ones who, are serving as like my fundraising chair and helping me with social media and helping plug in all the pieces so that I can be out there and be an effective leader. And I just find that support invaluable. I also love that I get to be surrounded by so many just dynamic women and their benefit from their creativity and their brilliance every day.
Absolutely. I love that. We've talked about some of the support that you've had from your sisterhood and from Emerge, but I'd love to talk about, the real question of running for office as a woman of color, and, particularly what are the hurdles that you think are unique to running as a woman, as a person of color, as a person that, needed Emerge to sort of amplify and push you and give you the toolkits. What are some of those hurdles for you personally?
Yeah. Um, I think I knew this going in, but I don't think I knew it until I got in, that politics in many places is still an old boys club, and that there is an establishment that has a way of doing things and an expectation for how it should work. And even folks who may say they are the most progressive leaders out there, they still don't quite know how to handle or deal with a woman being in the race. I cannot tell you the number of people who, the minute they meet me, the first thing they go to is, how can I do this with a child, especially a young child? My son is under 2, and that's still like one of the number one questions. And so I think navigating that club is a hurdle. I think as a woman of color, something I have also found interesting is, there are people who I've met in my networks who have, they have the Black Lives Matter signs up. They've been there at the rallies, they've been there at protests, and I thought when I called them, they were going to be the first to jump in and be a part of my campaign and be ready to go. But they've probably donated the smallest amounts or been the least frequent volunteers. And so I think it took a lot for me to learn that everyone who you think is going to be on your team may not be. And some of the folks who I never even guessed would be supportive have actually been my greatest rocks and the ones to jump in. And I think that was a lot to navigate. I also think too that as a Black woman, a lot of the issues we're facing and talking about, I mean, right now we have a huge conversation around school safety and police in schools. I feel these things differently than some of my counterparts. I feel them as a mom. I feel them as a Black woman. I feel them as a mom raising a Black son in this country. And there isn't always a space for those feelings and there's emotions. And so figuring out my own way of just kind of processing, what I'm thinking about, what I'm feeling, and how that shapes my policy making, has just also been another space that I have to navigate that I think is kind of unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that. And thank you for your honesty and for sharing that with us. And lastly, I can't let you go without asking, what would your advice be to women from the new American majority even thinking about running for office?
My advice would be, do it, go for it. You don't need another degree. You don't need another thing. You are qualified. Your experience qualifies you. Your story qualifies you. And the fact that you care and have ideas and just want to make the place that you intend to serve better is enough. You are enough. That's all I can say. As simple as that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. It has been lovely to meet you. And thank you to the viewers for joining us as well. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Races to Watch. Subscribe to our channel for updates and more great conversations with Emerge leaders from coast to coast. Aaliyah, once again, we so appreciate you and good luck with everything.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.